Now, earlier on the show today, we were talking about the midterms and the results of those midterms with presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. And she made the case that a new generation has put democracy over partisanship. Take a look.
Every now and then you get a generation that comes up, and young people voted in record numbers. They voted for democracy. That means they were willing to put their short-term needs about inflation and the economy against the larger-term abstract thing that democracy matters. And every now and then you get a generation like that. That was the Rendezvous with Destiny with FDR. It was John Kennedy talking about do something for your country and not just for yourself. It was Obama giving that sense of hope for the future. And when that happens, something's happened in the country, and I think that's the most important thing. We need to take a sense of contagious excitement from that democracy was on the ballot. The president helped direct it toward us, but the people themselves came through. And the reason they did this time, it was the first time that they got to vote. After 2020, after the January 6th, after the hearings, they were on the ballot finally, and the people came through. And that's what I think we should be talking about today. That's the celebration. The system held, and the people spoke their minds, and they voted for something larger than what we thought they would, inflation and economics. They voted for their country. And that, to me, is the most exciting thing.
The people came through. They voted for something larger than themselves. They voted for the country. Wow. From one historian to another, let's bring in our good friend, professor of history at Rice University, Doug Brinkley. He's the author of the new book titled Silent Spring Revolution. John F. Kennedy, Rachel Carson, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, and the Great Environmental Awakening. We're going to get to the book in just a moment, Doug, but Doris was talking about FDR's Rendezvous with Destiny, JFK, a new frontier, challenging people to ask not what their country could do for them, but what they could do for their country. Barack Obama's hope and change. And now Doris believes a new generation that put democracy ahead of short-term concerns, whether it be inflation, whether it be crime, those short-term issues. They voted, as Doris said, for something bigger than themselves. What's your take?
I agree with Doris. Generation Z did an amazing job showing up and voting. You know, I've been teaching, Joe, I've known you for a long time. There's something different going on right now about young people in their 20s. They really want to take over and tackle the tough issues. The one I've noticed young people being most concerned about is climate change. They're working that beat all the time. You were just talking about the moon shot. They want an earth shot. They feel that our generation or baby boomers didn't do their job, that the planet is in deep distress, and that and we see it with mega wildfires and floods and epic hurricanes, and it's just going to be a part of our daily life. So on climate, young people are leading. They took the abortion issue and said, what? I'm in my 20s and you're taking a freedom away from me? And I think that brought a lot of young people out. And then the very premise which Joe Biden did a good job of shopping, really, is that the democracy itself is on the ballot, and democratic values, and defense of the Ukraine, and making sure NATO stays whole. So it made the difference. They were the game changers in this past election, young people, and that's exciting.
No question about it. They turned out and they voted overwhelmingly Democratic. And in that context, you had Donald Trump making his announcement late last night at Mar-a-Lago that he's coming back for more, another run. Obviously, a very different man than he was when he announced 7 years ago. He's been through and damaged by so much, all brought on by himself mostly. What's your assessment of his getting back into the race and what it means for our politics?
He's an incredibly shrinking politician or power broker. It reminds me more of Millard Fillmore, got out of the White House and then ran a know-nothing party, which was filled with bigotry towards, Mormons and Catholics and Jews and blacks. And yet he wants to be the Grover Cleveland president, the one who had one term, lost, and then comes back in. It's hard to imagine it happening. Trump lost to Hillary Clinton by, 10 million votes when he got to be president. Then he lost the midterm, he lost the presidency again, and this is a Trump midterm loss. So this is a deeply damaged ex-president like I haven't seen. And instead of, now we're talking about him being a mixture of Warren Harding, who's known for corruption, Andrew Johnson, he's already beat. He's had double impeachment, not one. And then he's trying to do something kooky, know-nothing Trumpian party. I think he's going to be challenged mightily by a number of Republicans.
Quite a resume you just laid out right there. Not to mention he's under investigation, a couple federal probes and some on the state level as well. Let's talk about the book, Doug. It's called Silent Spring Revolution. Borrows, of course, from the title of Rachel Carson's milestone book in 1962. What did you want to say about the movement and what happened in those years in the 1950s and 60s that brought about the movement we see today?
The movement began really in 1945 with Hiroshima, Nagasaki. What a shocker. Yes, we won the war against Japan, but now we had a nuclear age. And we had a monopoly in the United States on nuclear weapons, 1945 to 49. Nobody else had them. But lo and behold, Russia got them, and we're still living with fear of Russia and nuclear weapons. But we started testing nuclear weapons really willy-nilly. From 1945 to 1992 in the United States, we tested 1,054 nuclear weapons, blowing them up in airspace, most of it in the Marshall Islands or in the Frenchman Flats in Nevada, and we got fallout, and people got sick, downwinders, and that fallout came all the way to the East Coast. And so people were worried that, like Martin Luther King Jr., I write in the book, said, what good does it do to integrate a lunch counter if the milk you're drinking is contaminated with the nuclear debris and is radioactive? That anti-nuclear testing movement, which John F. Kennedy deserves kudos for passing the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty with Russia and Britain so we don't blow up weapons anymore like that. But that movement met with the wilderness lobby that was more like Theodore Roosevelt, meaning saving national parks. I write in the book how Lyndon Johnson saved Canyonlands in Utah and North Cascades in Washington and Redwood in California and the Apostle Islands in Wisconsin. And that lobby met with Rachel Carson. And Rachel Carson is a revolution, a one-woman revolution, because she went after DDT, that it was bad for human health, animal and wildlife would die. But she was telling mothers and fathers of America, your children are sick if they're playing in their backyard. And at that point, the USDA and counties were blanket spraying DDT all over places. So, it's these movements all kind of congealed, and we had three presidents that met the moment: Kennedy, Johnson, and Nixon.
And if you could explain, Doug, because it surprised me later on looking back and going back to Nixon's presidency. Nixon's always the one that doesn't seem to fit here. When people think of Nixon, they, for good reason, think about Watergate. They think about dirty tricks. They think about the committee to re-elect the president. They don't think about the guy who who founded the EPA, the guy who actually was progressive on environmental issues in the early 70s, the same way, people won't believe it, but he was progressive on civil rights issues in the late 1950s.
Absolutely. For one thing, Joe, he came from California, and he, of course, lived at San Clemente. So a lot of his rich Republican donors were NIMBY people. Not in my backyard are you going to build a nuclear plant or a aluminum, siding factory. So Nixon understood that. But what really changed it for him is when he ran for president in 1968, he hired John Ehrlichman to be his domestic advisor. Ehrlichman was a land water lawyer out of Seattle who made his fortune going after polluters. People don't really realize that about Ehrlichman. We consider...
No.
Yeah, Ehrlichman was a covert green working with the Sierra Club and people, and Nixon had no real interest, so he told Ehrlichman, you draw up the documents and we'll do it as long as Ed Muskie doesn't have anything to do with it. Nixon loathed Muskie. And part of the drama also was the Santa Barbara oil spill, Joe. It hit He was only president days and that hit. And then you have the Cuyahoga River on fire in Ohio, the Rouge River in Michigan. And there's this drumbeat to do something. So Nixon tries to triangulate or co-opt the issue. And on January 1, 1970, he signs NEPA, which is the birth of the Environmental Impact Statement, which we all live by today. And then after Earth Day, the first Earth Day, April 22nd, 1970, Nixon, understanding what's going on, creates the Environmental Protection Agency with William Ruckelshaus as its first. And if it's Rachel Carson who wrote Silent Spring to get rid of DDT, it's Richard Nixon who finally bans DDT in 1972.
Well, you know, Willie, we're celebrating our 15th year, and perhaps we need to look back over our 15 years and get some segments back. I think today a good one would be, what have we learned today? What I learned today is John Ehrlichman was an environmentalist. I never saw that one coming.
Yeah, in the closet about it, but doing it anyway. Doug, the new book, Silent Spring Revolution, John F. Kennedy, Rachel Carson, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, and the Great Environmental Awakening. It is out now. Doug Brinkley, thanks so much. Congrats on the book. Good to see you.
Thank you.